my name is Helen Neville. I'm a scientist at the University of Oregon, and I study the development of the human brain. I work with a team of researchers studying the effects of children's experiences on the development of the brain, on its architecture, and on how it functions. We made this program because in the course of our research, we realized how beneficial it would be if everyone who cares for children knew something about the brain, how it works, how it grows, and most importantly, how experience shapes the developing organization and the functioning of the brain. So first, I will talk a little about the brain, why it is so important, what it is made of, and how it works in the adult. Then I'll describe how the brain's architecture develops over a span of at least 25 years. Following this introduction, different scientists from our team will provide you with evidence from scientific research that shows the very powerful effects that experiences have in building the human brain. We present the facts because it is critical that every claim that's made about how to best care for and educate children is backed up by solid scientific evidence. As important as this is, many of the claims that we hear from the media or in ads are not supported by evidence. In this program, every statement we make is based on solid scientific evidence, and references to the relevant studies are listed in a special feature at the end of the DVD. There, you will also find a list of websites with further information on each topic. Most of the evidence we will talk about is based on studies of the human brain. Sometimes we will also mention research from studies of other animals. These studies are important because they provide evidence that we cannot obtain from humans. In different sections of this program, we will talk about the effects of experience on 9 different brain functions. You can use the menu to select topics of specific interest to you. The ability of the brain to change with experience is called plasticity. Different parts of the brain are most plastic or changeable by experience at different times. These time periods are called sensitive periods. And it is during these sensitive periods that normal, positive experiences can lead to a healthy and strong brain architecture. For example, playing games, walking, family talks, and preschool, all of these contribute to building a healthy, well-functioning brain. This is similar to the way in which building a strong foundation for a house ensures a strong building. However, it also means that if normal experiences are absent during this time, a weak, fragile architecture that will require considerable fixing will be established. A major goal of brain research is to find out how to build a strong, healthy brain architecture, one that will give children a strong foundation for future growth and development. You will hear many facts about different sensitive periods throughout these presentations. Well, let's take a look at a human brain. As you can see, it's quite small, around 2 to 3 pounds, the size of your 2 fists put together. One of the first ways that scientists learned the full importance of the brain was by noticing that damage to different parts of the brain caused the loss of very specific functions. For example, damage to this back part of the brain can make a person blind, even if they have perfectly good eyes. Damage here on the left hemisphere usually leads to loss of language. And damage to the front part of the brain can dramatically change an individual's personality and their ability to make decisions and plans. From observing the effects of brain damage on behavior, and also by using new brain imaging techniques that I'll talk about in a minute, we know that the brain is important for every single thing that we know, everything that we do, and everything that we feel. Yet this all-important organ, the brain, is very fragile. The brain in your head right now is the consistency of room temperature butter. And unlike broken bones or cuts and bruises, the brain in general does not regrow after damage. The brain is encased in a hard bone, the skull, for protection. Yet still, any knock to the head or strong shaking can lead to irreversible harm by causing the soft brain to bang against the hard bone of the skull twice, as shown in this animation. This is what happens in shaken baby syndrome, for example. And of course, we all know that even hard bones get broken. That's why wearing bicycle and other helmets during sports activities is so important at any age. Well, what is the brain made of? It's made of cells that can only be seen with a microscope. These cells are called neurons, and they are specialized to communicate by sending and receiving electrochemical signals. Each neuron also receives signals on this tree-like structure. Here's an image of one single neuron. How many neurons like this do we have in our brain? Around 200 billion. That's as many neurons as there are stars in a galaxy. Well, how do we study the different parts of the brain as they work? One way is to record the electricity that the brain makes as it is engaged in different functions. We do this by picking up the electrical signals using sensors sewn to a hat. This procedure is completely harmless. It is like listening to or eavesdropping on the brain's electrical conversations. It's similar to how a stethoscope allows us to amplify the sounds of a beating heart. There's another technique we can use to see the structure of the brain with exquisite detail. This is called magnetic resonance imaging, or MRI. Now, most of what we know is about the organization of the brain in the adult. We are currently conducting the same type of research with children of different ages to learn how the human brain develops throughout childhood. With this scientific-based evidence, parents, teachers, and policymakers will be able to confidently make informed decisions about how best to nurture our children, enabling them to reach their greatest potential. Now, where does all this very organized architecture that we see in the adult brain come from? Is it present at birth? What is the role of experience in building the brain's architecture? Well, at birth, the human brain is very immature. In fact, we have learned an astonishing fact over the past few years, that the basic architecture of the brain is not fully mature until at least 25 years after birth. This can be seen in this figure, showing the number of connections in the human brain at different ages. This indicates the very rapid rate at which connections between neurons are being made in early childhood. But then, about half of these connections are lost over the next several years between early childhood and young adulthood. So the 2-year-old child has twice as many brain connections as her mom. One of the major ways that experience can shape brain development is by determining which of these many connections will become a stable part of the brain architecture and which will not. We can think of experience acting like a sculptor who begins with more clay than he needs. By removing specific bits of the material, a particular organization or shape is formed. So the growth and loss of connections is one of several ways that experience shapes how the brain grows and functions. Just as individual artists create unique pieces, each child will develop uniquely based on their own particular experiences. So in summary, different parts of the adult brain control every single aspect of human functioning. However, these brain systems are very immature in the human infant. It takes at least 25 years before the human brain functions as an adult brain. During this long developmental timeline, there are many sensitive periods when these brain systems are dependent on and shaped by experience. The brains of adults are also changed by experience, but children's brains are especially flexible and changeable. The primary purpose of this program is to provide you with evidence about the changeability or plasticity of the developing brain. For those interested in getting even more information, we have put a list of the references to the specific studies that provide the evidence for every one of the statements in this program in a special feature at the end of the DVD. We have also included a list of other resources on the topics we cover. We sincerely hope you find this program and information valuable.
Our eyes are windows to the world, gathering information that our brains interpret, enabling us to perceive our surroundings. In this segment, we will take a look at vision, how it works, how it develops, as well as ways to identify and address some common vision problems. The lens of the eye focuses light into an image at the back of the eye. Here, bright and dark are turned into electrical signals that travel through the optic nerve to the midbrain and on to the back of the brain. A large portion of the brain is devoted to interpreting these visual signals: how bright the image is, how it is moving and changing, and how patterns are arranged.
While most babies are born with fully functioning eyes, vision is something that must be learned. And it's in the first year of life that we learn to see, to focus, and to align our eyes, and to look towards sights and sounds that interest us.
In the first year, babies become experts in vision. They can see fine details, and they key into new sights, things that move or have unusual or striking patterns, and they can recognize many different faces and subtle facial expressions. At birth, a baby only sees a very fuzzy image and can't coordinate his two eyes. But at a few months old, the image becomes sharp, the eyes work in synchrony, and the baby can track objects and make sense of the fast-changing scenes. During this time, not only is the brain learning to organize what the eyes see, but what the eyes see is in turn affecting the development of the brain. The connections between neurons that process visual signals change dramatically. Some connections are strengthened, and many less used connections are broken. Which connections are favored between neighboring neurons and between brain areas depends on what the baby sees. The important parts of vision are shaped by the sights to which the baby is exposed. Color, motion, and form are interpreted and combined in different parts of the brain. Each of these parts of vision are tuned by early experience. There is a two-way street between what kids see and how their brain is prepared to interpret what they see. For example, all kids figure out what's important about written words and letters, the letter's shape, or how letters and words are grouped together by seeing many examples on street signs or in a book or a comic strip. In order for the child's brain to develop and organize the world, her eyes need to work properly. Many eye problems need to be taken care of right away to allow the brain to build critical visual skills. Recognizing common vision problems is the first step to correcting them, and we will point out some of the things to look for and do at the end of this segment. It's important to recognize that having functioning eyes is only the first half of seeing well. The brain needs to be able to organize and interpret what the eyes provide. Even with perfectly good eyes, if that part of the brain is damaged, sight is damaged. You can be blind even with perfect eyes. This part of the brain needs good input from the eyes to develop correctly, and that's why it is so important to correct eye problems as early as they are noticed. There are some parts of vision that continue to change and get fine-tuned well into early childhood. Kids need to be able to see all the details of letters and words. If their eyes can't see important details, that information can't be used by the brain, and the brain can actually lose the ability to recognize the details. Even if vision is regained later, their brain might not be able to use all of what they can see. It's not just text and reading. The same thing happens with recognizing faces and facial expressions and other things like finding their way around school or the supermarket. One example of the brain's loss of visual capability occurs when kids are born with cataracts in their eyes. Cataracts blur their vision and make it difficult to tell the difference between shades of light and dark. Cataracts can often be completely removed so the eyes are just as good as if the kids never had them. But if cataracts are not removed early, within the first 6 weeks, the kids will never see details as well as if they had been removed in that early period. Their eyes are just as good, but their brain has lost some of the ability to use what the eyes provide. Some parts of vision can never be recovered. There are other eye conditions that cause blurring of vision with the same result. Also, it is not uncommon for one eye to dominate vision while the other eye wanders, eventually losing its function altogether.
Most vision problems can be corrected or made less severe. It's important to try to solve these problems as early as possible because it's not just the eyes that are needed to see well. The brain needs to be able to know how to change to fully use the sight we have. Kids with low vision, even permanently low vision, learn to use what they have. Even the weakest vision is useful in everyday life, and the more vision, the better.
It's the family and teachers who talk with the kids the most and see what they see, who are most likely to recognize that a child might have a vision problem. Kids might never have seen the world with clear vision and have no reason to think that they don't see well. It's parents and teachers who need to motivate a visit to an eye doctor, and the doctor can then track down specific problems and suggest ways to improve vision. A few of the warning signs that a child needs a vision checkup include: one eye drifts or aims in a different direction than the other. This is significant even if it only occurs when the child is tired or stressed. Turns or tilts head to see. Squinting or closing of one eye, particularly while reading. Headaches or eye strain. Double vision. This DVD contains a set of checklists and resources for parents to help them identify possible vision problems and options available for improving children's vision. Be aware of possible vision problems, as young children don't often recognize or communicate the problem. Take care of vision problems in young children. Sooner is better than later because the brain can adapt better in early life. Sound vibrations travel as waves like ripples from a drop of water in a pool. The sound waves are translated by our ears into electrical signals perceived by the brain. As with vision, positive early experience with sounds is important in developing good hearing throughout the rest of life, an ability that is fundamental in the development of spoken language, of music, and our ability to safely navigate a complex and sometimes confusing world. We usually think of this flap, called the pinna, as our ear. So when we say we hear with our ears, it isn't strictly true. The outer ear directs sound into the ear canal where hearing really begins. At the end of the ear canal, the eardrum translates vibrations from the air to a series of 3 tiny bones suspended inside the skull. One of these bones, the stirrup, is the smallest bone in the human body. These tiny bones amplify and conduct the vibrations into a fluid-filled coiled structure called the cochlea. Inside the cochlea is a special membrane that responds differently to the different pitches in sound waves. Exquisitely sensitive hair cells embedded in this membrane translate the vibration energy into electrical signals. These signals travel through a nerve to auditory areas of the brain, ending in the temporal lobe. Hearing isn't just about being able to tell the difference between noise and silence. It's about being able to separate sounds from one another so important information can be understood. It's the brain that makes meaning from these electrical signals. This ability develops through experience with sounds during infancy and childhood. The quality of this experience matters, and positive early experience with sounds is important in developing good hearing throughout the rest of life. For example, loud, repetitive sounds have been shown to cause poor organization of auditory processing. Loud sounds a child might hear near a factory, playing video games, near an airport, or busy traffic could affect their ability to tell the difference between speech sounds. For example, between the b and p sounds that would allow them to hear the difference between the words big and pig. So, it is important to remember that a child's environment has a significant impact on the development of their hearing. Problems with hearing early in life can lead to significant problems later on, so it's important to identify and address these problems as early as possible. For example, ear infections are a common problem in young children. When the area surrounding the bones in the middle ear is infected, it becomes full of fluid. The pressure pushes on the eardrum, causing pain and reduction in sensitivity to sounds. Most ear infections are easy to treat, but multiple infections over a long period of time can cause speech development delays in children due to hearing loss. Good hearing in early childhood is important for normal speech development. One of the ways we know this is through studies of children born with difficulty hearing. Depending on the reason for hearing impairment, hearing aids can be an effective treatment. However, for some children, hearing aids don't work. But if the auditory nerve inside the cochlea is functional, a special device can be surgically implanted to restore hearing. Cochlear implants receive sounds from the environment and turn them into electrical signals that the brain can understand. The age at which a child who was born deaf receives cochlear implants has an effect on how well their spoken language will develop. Most children who get an implant before the age of 3.5 develop normal speech. Only about half of the children who get these implants between the ages of 3.5 and 7 learn to speak normally. And almost no children who receive the implant after age 7 learn to speak normally, though they may experience some hearing improvements. It is important to diagnose hearing loss as early as possible to allow parents to choose the best treatment option for their child, or perhaps to learn new communication skills. The early detection of hearing loss is so important that in most states a special hearing test is required within a few days of birth. This simple test uses an electrode to record the electrical response of the auditory brain stem to a series of clicks delivered to the infant through headphones.
Overall, we know that a child's environment can affect how their brain processes sound, so it's important to pay special attention to that environment to help children develop healthy hearing skills. Problems with hearing early in life can lead to significant problems later on, so it's important to identify and address these problems as early as possible.
Here are some things to remember. First, hearing problems need to be detected as early as possible. Pediatricians should routinely give hearing tests. Concerns about a child's responsiveness to sound should be followed up by a physician who specializes in hearing disorders. Parents should also play an active role in protecting their child's hearing. It's a good idea to avoid constant, repetitive sounds whenever possible.
Pharaoh, it's too loud. You have to turn it down.
They can help a young child's brain make sense of sounds by playing rhyming games, identifying interesting sounds,
Sky, do you hear the birds?
and by listening to and playing music. Hearing is one of the many wonderful ways our brain allows us to experience the world. Imagine a baby playing soccer. It seems funny, but why? Kicking a ball and running are examples of motor skills. These skills require practice that a baby has not had. For example, in order to kick a ball, a child must know the position of the ball. If he is close to the ball, then his brain decides how hard to kick. If he is far from the ball, then his brain also decides how to get to the ball. Children must learn to piece together the movements necessary for kicking, just as we must learn to use our muscles to accomplish any number of physical tasks. But motor development entails more than just learning to use muscles. A child's changing brain must learn how to coordinate information from several brain systems in order to make a specific movement. These systems control movement, balance, and even brain areas that relay input from the surrounding world. When movements are made in response to the physical world, the brain first receives information about the world through the 5 senses. A sensory brain region begins to process this information. Then, the information is passed to the parts of the brain that control movement and balance. Motor function is localized to very specific parts of the brain. For example, the cerebellum uses sensory information to help maintain balance and posture, while movement is controlled by the brain's motor systems. Within the motor system, there are specific regions that control gross movements, such as running. A separate region, the motor cortex, controls fine movements, such as piano playing. Interestingly, nerve cells in the motor cortex are arranged like a little man or a homunculus. For example, nerves that represent the hand are next to nerves that represent the arm, which in turn are next to the shoulder, and so forth. The brain acts as a control center, telling the body how to respond to its environment. Nerves from the motor cortex connect to nerves in the spinal cord. Spinal cord nerves connect to muscles. The brain uses the nerve connections between the motor cortex and spinal cord to direct movement. The nerve connections are like wires that conduct messages between the brain and the body. The connection between the brain and muscles is strengthened in a growing child by use.
Researchers looked at young animals when the link between the brain and the spine was forming. The young animals were prevented from using their limb when they were young, and then, consequently, as adults, they were unable to use that same limb very well. This result suggests that it's important for children to have the opportunity to use their muscles when they're young in order to develop a strong connection between the brain and the spine.
In general, normal use leads to normal development, but too little activity can slow development. Leaving babies and children for long periods of time in playpens, strollers, and car seats can delay the time at which children learn to roll over, crawl, walk, and even can delay their mental development. And simply providing a safe environment and encouraging babies and toddlers to explore this environment can contribute to normal development. For older children, organized sports can promote healthy motor and social skills. Other activities like walking through a park, biking, or dancing can also be helpful for developing motor skills. Watching a child grow, you'll see that as a newborn, she can only grab at things, but soon progresses to lifting her head, to rolling over, crawling, to standing, and then as a toddler to walking. As children grow, they will experience clumsy periods. The clumsy periods may reflect rewiring of the brain and muscle connections following a period of growth. Unlike adults, children's bodies are continually changing. For example, a 20-inch newborn will add about 10 inches to his height in the first year of life. So, as children grow, they must constantly relearn how their changing bodies work. Motor activity not only contributes to normal development, but may also improve the development of children with disabilities. Usually, children with Down syndrome begin to walk 1 year later than those without it. But research has shown, when given specialized treadmill training, these children begin walking on their own sooner than infants with Down syndrome who do not get the extra help. Starting specialized treadmill training sooner rather than later increases its benefits. Why should we be concerned with developing children's motor skills? Early motor experiences provide a foundation for a child to interact with the world. Encouraging your child to be active will likely promote an active adult lifestyle. Research has found links between a couch potato lifestyle and a variety of health problems, such as diabetes, heart disease, obesity, and stroke. Give babies and children lots of opportunities to engage in playful, exploratory activities. Simple everyday games such as peekaboo, tag, and hide-and-go-seek can help the normal development of the brain's motor systems. Playing not only strengthens muscles, it strengthens the connections in the brain. Attention is important in almost everything we do, from tying a shoelace to learning to read or even crossing the street. Without the ability to pay attention, our world would be a jumble of images and sounds. Try this experiment. On the screen, there is an image. Pay close attention as it flickers. Do you notice anything changing? Now, look at the lower left corner of the screen. you should see a man's pants changing colors. In this case, your brain wasn't aware of the color change until you directed your attention to the right location. Now imagine what it's like for a child in a classroom.
Is everyone doing okay?
If Jane's attention is not focused in the right place, she can be completely unaware of important instructions or information. When Jane focuses her attention on something specific, her brain produces a bigger response to what she is focusing on. Attention actually changes how her brain responds. While we typically think of attention as a single thing, there are actually different kinds of attention. These different kinds of attention are associated with different brain areas, use different chemicals, and develop at different times in our lives. These three aspects of attention include orienting our attention, maintaining our attention, and controlling or regulating our attention. One of the earliest attention skills to develop is the ability to orient or move attention from one thing to another. One of the brain areas most involved in this is the parietal lobe. This aspect of attention is not developed at the time of birth. In fact, newborns have particular difficulty orienting their attention during the first 4 months of life. During this time, when a child is distressed, her attention is difficult to redirect. However, parents and caretakers should not be alarmed. This stage of attention development is completely normal. To ease their growing pains, newborns should be held and gently rocked so that their distress can peacefully subside. Shaking toys or stuffed animals won't work, as their attention can't be distracted or forced into compliance. However, in a few months, as this skill develops, caregivers will notice that they can soothe their children in different ways. During the first few years of life, a different attention skill is beginning to develop: the ability to stay awake and alert, which is regulated by structures deep inside the brain, as well as frontal and parietal areas of the cortex. These areas of the brain mature and adapt as young children develop healthy patterns of wakefulness and rest. The normal development of these patterns will help infants sleep through the night, as well as stay alert for longer periods of time while awake. As children get older, they will gain the ability to sustain their attention for longer and longer amounts of time. This aspect of attention continues to develop at least through 10 years of age. Finally, the third type of attention is the ability to regulate attention and control impulses. When children are around 2 years of age, they experience what could be considered a mismatch in development. Their motor and language skills allow them to move, talk, and interact, but their ability to regulate their attention is just beginning to emerge. Parents are familiar with the inconsolable frustration, crying, thrashing, and yelling typical of children of this age. This is why some people label the toddler years the terrible twos. However, the word terrible is somewhat misleading, as this is a completely natural phase of development. During this time, children are beginning to use their attention to develop patience, to control their emotions, and to direct their focus. During this relatively short period of time, it is important for parents and teachers to treat children with patience and understanding while they struggle with this ability. When a child has an outburst, try not to respond with anger. Instead, check with your child about the emotions and feelings behind the outburst. If your child is too upset to talk, you may need to allow a cooling off period. Make sure she is physically safe, and after your child has calmed down, a conversation can begin. The most extreme displays of the terrible twos usually dissipate by the time a child is 4 years old. Many aspects of attention actually continue to develop into the second decade of life. But you might be wondering, if all these behaviors are normal, how do I know if my child has an attention deficit? The media bombards us with so many conflicting stories about attention problems in children that it's hard to separate myth from fact. Let's take a look at the facts. Right now, between 3 and 5% of children in the United States are diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD. An ADHD diagnosis is based on observing specific behaviors in children, for example, the inability to sit still or difficulty ignoring distractions. But, as we saw earlier, all children show these symptoms to some degree. What sets ADHD apart is that the symptoms are persistent and occur in multiple settings, school and home, for example. And it's important to realize that even though a child can sustain his attention while watching a movie or playing video games, he might still have difficulty controlling his attention in other settings. If you suspect a child may have ADHD, it is important to open the lines of communication between parents and teachers, as well as between different teachers at a child's school.
Hi, Mrs. Charney. This is Michelle Griffin, Ashley's homeroom teacher.
Also, try to determine whether she is inattentive only during certain activities, such as reading or math. This is important, as sometimes a child's difficulty is specific to reading or math, but can be confused for a general attention deficit. If you still think that your child might have ADHD, talk to your doctor or school psychologist so that your child can get the appropriate care.
It's very easy for us as adults to form unrealistic expectations for what a young child's attention skills should look like. It's important to remember that things that bother us, crying, late-night awakenings, even temper tantrums, are actually a normal part of every child's attention development. That said, parents and caregivers can also consider ways to support a child's developing attention skills.
When newborns are distressed, hold and rock them gently, allowing plenty of time for their distress to be soothed. Maintain regular bedtimes to help children develop normal sleep schedules. If a child has trouble focusing in school, ask if she can be moved to the front of the classroom where distractions may be less likely. Observe their attention skills in different social settings and their engagement in different activities. Talk to the child, teachers, and parents to discover how she's developing. Finally, provide children with opportunities to make the most of their developing attention skills. Be creative. Introduce activities that allow children to pay attention for longer periods of time, to control their bodies and behaviors, and to notice small details in the world around them. Infants don't come into the world ready to sit still and listen. They need time to develop these abilities. When infants and children are given the time, opportunity, and environment for attention to develop, they'll be developing a set of skills that they will use to help them learn throughout their lives. Being patient and supportive is a powerful way to encourage children's attention and learning. The ability to use language is one of the things that makes us human. Language is the backbone of human society. It allows us to share the joy and pain of everyday life and to share knowledge and culture across generations. While other species cannot learn human language even with years of intensive training, all humans, with the proper input, are able to acquire and use language with little effort. Children pick up language at an amazing rate. By the time they are 2 years old, most children already know many words, and some know as many as 500. By the time they are 4 years old, most children are able to understand and use language in much the same way adults do. Of course, a child isn't just born with a language ready to go. As with the other brain systems we've talked about, a child's early experience builds the areas of the brain that support good language skills. For most people, the brain areas most involved in language processing are the frontal and temporal areas of the left hemisphere. This is true whether a language is spoken or whether it's a signed language, like American Sign Language. Signed languages like ASL use the same brain systems and show similar patterns of development as spoken languages. The role of experience in shaping the brain systems important for language starts very early. Evidence suggests that a child starts learning something about language while still in the womb. Studies have shown that at birth, babies already recognize their mother's voice on the day they are born.
For the first several months of life, babies really are incredible language learners. They can actually tell the difference between two sounds from any language in the world. That's something that neither you nor I can do.
It's in the first 9 months of life that we see how important language experience is for children. This is when the language children hear from their parents and others allows them to zero in on the sounds in their native language. But it isn't just the sounds that infants are hearing. When they hear the same language sounds from a recording, from a CD or TV, they don't zero in on those sounds like they do when the sounds are coming from a live human interaction.
So the social interaction between parents and children, not just the sounds they're hearing, is very important for children's development of language. And as children are zeroing in on the sounds of their native language, they also begin to understand that we use different words for different things and actions in the world.
Soon, children are learning several words a day. Even before they can speak, children understand a lot of language. Babies who are only 8 months old show a preference for words they have heard frequently in stories. We actually use the techniques described in the introduction to see how the brain changes and becomes more adult-like as children begin to understand and use the structure of language more like adults do. But these brain changes do not happen automatically when children reach a certain age. In fact, the changes we see in the brain only happen when children actually learn more words and more complex sentence structure. And this is where the experiences a child has are very important in shaping early language learning. Some very interesting research has shown just how important the right kinds of language experiences are for building good language skills. Researchers have found that children whose parents talk to them more often and with more adult-like words and longer sentences have larger vocabularies and are better able to use and understand more advanced language structure.
Look at his face. Look at how round his face is. See? That's perfectly round.
But it isn't just the way parents talk to their children that is important. Research conducted in the Brain Development Lab at the University of Oregon looked at the language skills of children whose parents were in a special program. This program taught them to encourage their children to talk a lot and to make a special effort to listen to their children and take turns when they had a conversation. These children, compared to children whose parents did not get this training, had improved language skills after just 8 weeks. And it isn't just parents. The language experience children have with other adults is important too. Another study looked at children in classrooms with preschool teachers who used longer and more complicated sentences in their speech than other teachers did, and found that these children were better able to use and understand longer and more complicated sentences after just 9 months. Reading and sharing books is another very important type of language experience which helps build good brain structures for language. Many studies have shown the importance of reading and sharing books. Children whose parents share books with them every day have larger vocabularies and better language skills than children whose parents don't share books with them as often. As the world continues to become a smaller place, many people are finding it important to be able to communicate in more than one language. Being able to speak more than one language is a very valuable skill which helps children in many ways.
While many people think it's not a good idea to start teaching children a second language when they're very young, a lot of research has shown that this isn't the case. It's okay, and it's even a good idea, for children to start learning more than one language at the same time. In fact, most findings suggest that when it comes to teaching a child a second, or even third language, the earlier children learn, the better.
Children won't become confused with more than one language, and in fact, they will speak a second language better and with less of an accent than children who start learning a second language at a later age. This also means that children who are primarily learning English at school, but who may hear other languages in the home, will be just fine switching between the two languages. So it's okay and even a good idea for a child to speak one language at home and a different language in school. So the recent move in the United States towards teaching foreign languages in elementary school, or even preschool, is a positive step in helping children prepare for the future and is well supported by research. So just as we have seen in other segments of this DVD, for language learning, there seems to be a sensitive period when it is easier for people to master a second language, especially the sounds and structure of that language. Remember, research shows that all of these differences in language knowledge, from the words and structure of a first language to learning a second language, mean differences in a child's brain structure. These research results show that the experience that parents and other caregivers give children with language early in life will have a profound and lasting impact on the child's brain. So what does this research mean for you as a parent? How can you provide the type of language experience for your child that will lead to better knowledge and use of language? Well, the research reviewed here suggests that there are several things you can do with your child which will help. Talk a lot with your child, and don't be afraid to sometimes use more complex language than your child is using. When your child asks you a question, try to give a full explanation and ask your child questions to encourage a discussion. Read to and share books with your child every day. Consider encouraging your child to learn a second language as early as possible. There are a lot of resources in our society, such as books, playgrounds, and school programs where your child can get exposure to a second language. So, as with the other brain systems we've talked about, the evidence suggests that there are optimal periods for the effects of language experience on brain development. For language, this evidence suggests that the rule is, the earlier, the better. The ability to read is an invaluable tool in the acquisition and communication of knowledge between one another, as well as between generations and even civilizations. In today's world, it has become fundamental in our education, our occupations, indeed, to the very fabric of our lives. Reading is one of the most valuable acquired skills we can have. Now, imagine living in a world full of symbols you don't understand, symbols that could make an enormous difference in your life. This is a distressing reality far too many of us face. Surveys show that nearly a third of 8th graders lack in basic reading proficiency, and about 15% of adults lack in basic reading skills such as the ability to read instructions or a paragraph in a newspaper. In this segment, we will take a look at how we learn to read and the parts of the brain that enabled us to accomplish this task. We will also review steps that parents, teachers, and policymakers can take to encourage the development of this fundamental skill. First, let's look at which parts of the brain are involved during reading. Researchers have identified 3 regions in the left hemisphere that are activated during reading. 1 area in the front and 2 areas in the back. According to a widely accepted model of reading, the area in the front is involved in making speech sounds. This area in the back has been called a word form area, where the whole word is stored as a pattern. and the other area in the back converts visual information such as printed words into sounds. Reading would be difficult if these areas didn't work well together. Unlike speech, the ability to read does not develop naturally. It must be learned with practice and effort. There are two skills that, if learned early, will help children acquire the ability to read. The first skill is an awareness of speech sounds. This is called phonemic awareness. It is the ability to notice individual sounds in speech and to manipulate them. For example, children must know that the word cat is made up of 3 separate sounds, k, a, t, and that changing the initial sound to b, for example, makes a different word, bat. The second important element is a basic knowledge of the relationships between letters and sounds. Children need to know that letters stand for sounds, a, b, b, and they need to learn what sound each letter or combination of letters represents. Bat, cat.
If we start thinking of B sounds, words that start with B sounds, we might think of b, b.
Research has shown that children can start acquiring these pre-reading skills very early, providing them with a foundation to become better readers for life. In one study, a group of kindergartners who had low phonemic awareness engaged in an activity that let them tune into the individual sounds in words. They played with picture cards like these, picking up cards that shared the same sound. For example, ball, bag, and bee can be placed in the same group because they all begin with the sound b, while cat, cap, and cake can be placed in another group because they all begin with the sound k. Some of these children were also asked to pick out an alphabet letter that matched the sound. When tested after 2 years of practice, these children's reading skills were 8 to 10 months ahead of another group of children who sorted cards based only on the meaning of the card. To help monitor your child's progress in reading, here are some milestones you can look for. Young children at age 3 or 4 can start becoming familiar with rhyming. For example, by remembering nursery rhymes and playing rhyming games. By the end of kindergarten, children who are on track for reading development know all the letter names and sounds of the alphabet. They are also expected to have developed the skill to blend speech sounds to form words. Each of these skills has been found to predict later reading ability. By the end of 3rd grade, they are able to read age-appropriate materials aloud fluently. These are only a few of the many steps of reading development. You can find more information in the supplemental section of this DVD. Reading is a complex task. As we saw earlier, using brain techniques, researchers have been learning how the brain accomplishes this task and how it changes as children learn to read. The Brain Development Lab at the University of Oregon used the magnetic resonance imaging technique to study changes in the brain as kindergartners developed their early reading skills. At the beginning of kindergarten, half of the children in the study were on track for early reading development. They had good knowledge of letters and phonological awareness. The other half of the children had not yet acquired these skills to the same degree and were at risk for later reading difficulties. When researchers looked at brain activations while these children were looking at letters, they found striking differences between the two groups. Soon after they entered kindergarten, the on-track children were already activating one of the reading areas in the back of the brain. But, unlike adults, activations were similarly strong in both hemispheres. The at-risk children did not show any activations in this area in either hemisphere. After a few months, the researchers looked at the brain activations of the two groups again and found that the at-risk children had now begun recruiting this reading area at the back of the brain. In the on-track children, activations were now confined to the left hemisphere, as occurs in adults, suggesting mature specialization of the brain for letter processing. Some children struggle in learning to read, and about 1 out of 10 school-age children struggle with a severe form of reading difficulty called developmental dyslexia. Although these children may have normal intelligence, they lack an awareness of speech sounds. Adults who grew up with developmental dyslexia often show less activation of the areas in the back of the brain important for reading. A great amount of effort has been made to improve the reading skills of children with reading difficulties using instructional intervention programs. The common components of these intervention programs aim at increasing phonemic awareness by practicing, for example, separating sounds in words, blending sounds together to form words, or changing sounds in words to make different words. The programs also work on letter-sound associations. While conventional tests allow researchers to track improvement in reading abilities in children, the brain imaging techniques allow them to examine how the intervention changed the recruitment of different brain areas. They can see whether the intervention has made weak readers' brains become just like strong readers' brains, activating the same brain areas during reading, or whether the training made weak readers activate additional brain areas to compensate for the lack of activations in more typical reading-related areas. Some of these neuroimaging studies have shown an increase in activations in the reading-related areas after children went through successful intervention.
The ability to read is essential in our society, and you can do a lot to help young children build strong reading skills.
You can do simple, everyday activities such as playing word games or singing nursery rhymes. These are fun ways to play and become familiar with speech sounds, and they can help very young children increase their phonemic awareness. Reading books to children is a wonderful way to help them develop their reading skills. If you have a young child, you can start with picture books that contain simple words. Asking a child to read aloud is a great way to notice how they are improving, or if they are having difficulties. Start out by taking turns reading words or short phrases. Be sure that the child doesn't feel pressured to perform. Let them enjoy sharing reading experiences with you. With the right kind of help, even children with serious reading difficulties can improve their reading skills. Taking time to do simple activities with your children and monitoring their progress can make a big difference in their future.
You're good at this.
Galileo called mathematics the language in which the universe is written. Numbers are fundamental to our understanding of the world around us, to our interaction with it. And in today's complicated, technology-driven world, good math skills are more essential than ever. Number processing takes place in a network of brain regions. The intraparietal sulci are active during subtraction, addition, and comparisons of physical size. The left angular gyrus plays a role in representing arithmetic facts like 9 times 5 is 45. And the inferior frontal gyrus is thought to be involved with mathematical demands for working memory and planning.
Most people have a basic understanding of number. Other animal species and even human infants have been shown to be capable of performing some simple addition and subtraction problems. However, the more formal operations of arithmetic with number, words, and digits actually needs to be taught.
And this teaching can take place outside as well as inside the classroom.
the half a cup.
The preschool years are especially important for developing these skills.
9.
Research shows that children entering their first year of school do better in math if they are already familiar with a few basic concepts, such as the number sequence from 1 to 10, and that numbers relate directly to the physical world. For example, that the number 3 means 3 of something, and that 4 means 1 more than 3. Because this knowledge seems so basic to adults, it's easy to forget that children need to learn it.
2 plus 2 is 4.
But it doesn't have to be a chore.
4 plus 4 is
Learning
8,
about
and
numbers can be fun.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
The ability to estimate quantities is an important skill that develops very early and is something that we use in our everyday lives.
That looks like about 12 marbles to me.
Recent findings have shown that the skill of approximating the number of items in a group is correlated with math achievement from kindergarten through 6th grade. There is also evidence that for children with difficulties in math, practicing number discrimination in a computer game can improve their subtraction skills. Also, children in kindergarten, 1st, and 2nd grade who do well at estimating score higher on standardized math achievement tests. And again, there are fun and easy ways to encourage the development of these skills. Math is important in our increasingly technological age, and people who are good at math are able to make more informed decisions in areas like personal finance, insurance, and healthcare, where numbers play a big part. There are many things we can do to help children build their knowledge of math, like playing games that involve numbers, calling attention to when math is used in everyday life, asking them to make their own estimations. These kinds of activities can help build a child's confidence with numbers and strengthen their math skills, preparing them for a life in which working with numbers is a necessity. Throughout time, across cultures, from the great concert halls to places of worship, into bedrooms and garages, music is everywhere. Through music, we share our stories, our joys, our sorrows. Music is a fundamental form of human expression, whether we listen to it or create it. We even take stray noises from the world around us and make music in our heads. But beyond this, does music impact us on a basic neurological level? Several areas of the brain are involved in processing music, including the frontal and temporal lobes of both hemispheres. Interestingly, similar brain areas are active when processing the meaning and structure of a piece of music and when processing the meaning and structure of language. Can music affect brain development? Change the way we think? Make us smarter? Some people think so. You may have heard of something called the Mozart effect. Several years ago, researchers at the University of California, Irvine performed a study of the effects of music on spatial abilities in college students. For 10 minutes prior to the testing, students either listened to Mozart's Sonata for Two Pianos in D major or sat for 10 minutes in silence. The results showed that when students listened to Mozart, their scores were about 8% higher than when they sat in silence. Does this mean that music makes us smarter? Well, not entirely. First of all, this effect lasted only 15 minutes, and upon further study, researchers found that subjects tested better only after listening to certain kinds of music. Happy, not sad music. Fast music, not slow. They even found that people who preferred listening to stories rather than to music scored better when they heard a short story before testing than when they listened to music. Simply put, the evidence suggested that an activity which puts you in a good mood will improve your performance on a test taken directly afterwards.
Does this mean that listening to Mozart or other music isn't good for your child? Of course not. But it does suggest that just listening to music alone won't magically make your child smarter. And it also shows how important it is to be careful when considering evidence that sounds maybe just a little too good to be true.
And although initial researchers were careful not to overinterpret the results of their study, it was quickly picked up by the popular press and reported as evidence that Mozart makes you smarter. And even though the original experiment was conducted with college students, the hype eventually evolved into a popular understanding that Mozart could make even small children smarter. This in turn was acted on by marketers, resulting in a slew of consumer products whose benefits had no foundation in sound research. This is a good example of why it is important, when evaluating any such claim, to find a description of the initial research. Researchers have found that, on average, children who study music do have better language and math skills than children who do not, and that adult musicians, compared with non-musicians, have more brain cells in the areas involved with vision, hearing, and movement. Does this mean that studying music caused these improvements and changes in the brain? Not necessarily. It could well be the other way around. Maybe children who have better language or math skills, or more brain cells in certain areas of the brain, are more likely to want to study music and to keep studying music. The best way to answer the question of whether studying music makes you smarter is to take children who are equal in these skills and who have never studied music, and give music lessons to some and different kinds of lessons to others. Several studies have done this, and the results suggest that music lessons may actually make you a little bit smarter. In a study performed at the University of Toronto, researchers compared a group of first graders who were given piano or singing lessons for the entire school year to other groups who were given lessons that didn't involve music, like acting lessons, or who didn't take any lessons at all. While the kids who got acting lessons showed improvement that the other kids didn't on tests of social behavior, the kids who took music lessons showed more improvement on many skills measured by IQ tests. So, while babies who listen to Mozart are by no means guaranteed to grow into Einsteins, research does point to some positive links between music and certain brain functions. And involving children in music can be rewarding in so many other ways, stimulating their creativity, introducing them to new ideas and cultural expressions. You don't have to pay for expensive lessons or commute long distances to elite conservatories. As we said before, music is everywhere. Look into programs at your local community center. Ask about classes at your child's school. Take them to hear live music. Involve them with music at home. It doesn't take much to make a little music. Many animals and humans are raised in stimulating, nurturing, loving, and stable environments. Recently, brain researchers have begun to compare the effects of this kind of environment with the effects of stressful and neglectful environments on brain development and behavior. Let's start by taking a look at some of the animal research, because this tells us about the effects of different environments on the brain's cells, neural connections, and chemistry. In several studies, scientists at the University of Illinois compared two groups of rats. The first group were raised in a typical laboratory setting in which there was just one animal per cage with access only to food and water. Of course, that is not how most rats live in the real world. So, in an attempt to create a more natural environment, they also raised rats together, in cages that had balance beams, running wheels, and a variety of objects to interact with. When they looked at their brains, the rats that were raised in the more stimulating environment had many more brain cells and also more connections between brain cells than the rats raised alone. Furthermore, those rats raised in the complex environment performed much better on many different types of tasks, like learning a new maze, for example.
Other studies have seen similar effects in humans. Some children raised in orphanage settings were followed by researchers. The children received limited adult attention and adult stimulation while they were in the orphanage due to the low numbers of caretakers responsible for so many children. These children tended to do worse on problem-solving activities and other tasks that measure intelligence. However, when the children were adopted, their problem-solving abilities and intelligence levels increased. An important note is that the amount of increased intelligence was directly related to how much positive stimulation and interaction was provided to the adopted children in their new home settings.
For example, in the adopted homes, where children listened to music, were read books, went on walks, and received stable and nurturing attention from adults, there were large increases in intelligence. However, if the stimulation and nurturing was lower, there was considerably less improvement. Now, some of these same brain systems important in learning are also very important in social and emotional skills. Scientists have learned that healthy emotional experiences are at least as important as learning experiences in building healthy brains that provide a strong foundation for growth and development. For example, there is a brain structure which looks quite a bit like a seahorse, and it is called the Latin name for seahorse, hippocampus. This structure is responsible for making our memories, so it's clearly very important in learning. But it turns out that the hippocampus is also very important in regulating our emotional reactions to everyday events. And this structure is also very vulnerable to stress. For example, in rats that are reared by nurturing mothers, it becomes very plump with chemicals that promote the growth of new brain cells. However, if the mother is neglectful, it does not show hardly any of those chemicals. And just as learning promotes the growth of new brain cells, stress results in the loss of brain cells in this brain structure. Scientists have seen similar effects in humans. Exposure to repeated stress, for example, as a result of being afraid, hungry, or interacting with a parent who is abusive, neglectful, or depressed. This kind of stress causes the release of chemicals that are toxic to a child's brain, and that weaken its foundation and its architecture by interfering with brain cell growth and the formation of healthy brain connections. Compared to children in nurturing families, children raised in chronically stressful situations have persistently high levels of the chemical cortisol, which is harmful to brain cells. This has been seen using magnetic resonance imaging, a technique mentioned in the introduction. Research has shown that the hippocampus is decreased in size according to the length of time an individual is depressed or stressed. The overall size of this effect may depend in part on differences in types of genes, but both the studies of rats and humans show that chronic stress and depression are literally chemically toxic to the brain. Researchers have recently learned about different genes that are important in brain function, including the brain systems important in stress and depression. There are differences between people in the forms of the genes that are important in regulating emotions. Now, when we think of genes, we tend to think that their effects are fixed, determined, and unchangeable. But what scientists have discovered is that the effects of having different types of genes depend on the environment. When a person's relationships are nurturing and stable, people with all gene types are very unlikely to be antisocial or depressed. However, in stressful environments, people with certain genes are very likely to be aggressive and depressed. So, for emotional regulation, as for virtually every other aspect of human behavior, the consequences of having a particular type of gene are very different in nurturing as compared to stressful environments. Researchers have discovered that, regardless of a person's genetics, environment is quite often the determining factor in stress, depression, and aggression. Nurturing, responsive, stable interactions between children and caregivers, neighbors, friends, as well as parents and other family members, promote healthy brain development, and that gives children the opportunity to develop intellectually, socially, and emotionally. Researchers in the Brain Development Lab at the University of Oregon recently investigated whether training in good parenting skills could be effective in reducing family stress and in enhancing children's behavior and problem-solving skills. Over a period of 8 weeks, one group of parents received guidance in using language to facilitate positive interactions and consistent, predictable routines. Another control group did not receive parent training. Several remarkable changes occurred in the families that received the training. The stress levels in the families were reduced, and the children's social behavior improved significantly. In addition, the children in the families whose parents received training scored significantly higher on tests of language, problem-solving, memory, and reasoning. In addition, the brainwaves of these children indicated that their brains were processing information more quickly and in a more mature fashion. These results point to the great changeability or plasticity of developing brain systems. As parents, caregivers, and educators, we can contribute to good brain development and functioning by providing naturally stimulating environments. We have many easy ways of providing interesting environments for our children. Simple one-on-one game playing, walks to the park, talking and listening are all wonderful ways of contributing to a child's healthy growth. Another easy change we can make is to decrease passive TV viewing. Scientists have shown that children learn far better from a live person than from TV and videos. And many studies have shown that following exposure to violence on TV and in video games, aggressive and violent behavior increase significantly. By contrast, as we have heard in this program, more interactive talking, walking, reading, and listening to music foster strong and healthy brain development. The research also points to the critical role of having a loving, nurturing relationship. Sometimes this can be difficult if the caregiver is tired, depressed, or stressed. However, the same types of activities that promote healthy growth in the child can also lead to a healthier brain in a happier adult. In summary, nurturing environments foster good learning skills and brain development. Chronic stress, neglect, and depression are toxic to brain systems important in learning and healthy emotions. The consequences of having a particular type of gene are very different in nurturing versus stressful environments. Training in parenting skills can significantly reduce family stress and improve children's social and cognitive skills.
Mommy, give mommy, give mommy. Give mommy, give mommy.